And Senator Elizabeth Warren and 11 other Democrats pushing for new consumer protections legislation after that massive Equifax data breach. This follows many cyber experts warnings of weakening protections. And joining us now is Joel Brenner, senior advisor to the Chertoff Group, as well as former head of U.S. counterintelligence under the Director of National Intelligence. Welcome to you. Joel, I wonder the context in which you put this Equifax breach and what needs to happen now. It seems like every consumer should just assume that our information is out there now, and it's just a matter of making sure that criminals don't ruin us with it. What should legislators do in this new environment?
Well, I think, first of all, I agree with you. I've thought for some time that the notion that this data was private was regrettably an illusion. I don't say that because I welcome it. I just think it's an unpleasant fact. We've got some really serious unanswered questions about Equifax's behavior in light of the fact that a patch was issued on March 6th, and they don't seem to have responded to that. But I think the legislation, the bills that I've seen so far, and it's very early in the drafting process, have been focused on things like notification and whatnot, and I think that's more of the same and isn't going to do much. I think people should focus on not just why the breach happened and Equifax's behavior, but on why the consequences of a breach like this so bad. Why is it, for example, that somebody using my name can open a bank account in North Dakota where I've never been without talking to me?
Yeah.
I mean, why is it that it's so easy to steal people's identity based on the kind of information that's been stolen? I think if we begin to look at that end of it, that we might do more than simply focus on the cyber insecurity, although I'm happy to go into that if you want.
Well, Joel, it seems to me we're in an era now where credit monitoring, there are some services where you can get it for free. If somebody opens up an account or tries to open up an account under your name and social security number, you get notified for it. But then if you need some remediation, you have to pay. And it seems to me if somebody robs me on the street and I call the cops in the physical world, I don't have to pay for remediation in that case, but in the digital world with our information we do. Does that need to change? Does something need to change around the options that consumers have and how much they have to pay to fix these problems with our information?
Well, the options that consumers have are much too narrow. And it would be interesting, for example, to wonder, I saw late yesterday a suggestion from someone at the American Enterprise Institute. Why isn't everybody's credit locked by default and then open as an option? That would give the consumers an enormous amount of power over this kind of thing. But I want to focus on the behavior of the institutions at which these fake accounts are being opened. Because that, I think, is where some really totally unacceptable behavior is taking place. And I go back to my example. Why is it that a bank will open an account in my name without ever talking to me, or wire out of my account all or most of the money in it, which is not a transaction in the normal course of business, without talking to me? And I think if you looked at the liability at that end, you'd do a lot more than continuing to focus only on credit options and on the cyber insecurity, because we're not going to be able to do as much about that as we would like.
Joel, that raises a question for me. It's a policy question that's up for debate now. The Consumer Finance Protection Bureau under fire from some on the right saying it's unnecessary or redundant or taking too many liberties. Do we need within the government a watchdog over these sorts of issues, not just having to do with credit, but also having to do with personal information, digital hacking?
Well, I think so. But the question to me is what powers it's going to have, and that's a hard one to discuss in a 2-minute segment. My focus now isn't on the Consumer Protection Bureau, it's on the FTC. The FTC has powers to protect consumers in two ways. It protects against unfair trade practices and against deceitful trade practices. A deceitful practice, for example, is if a privacy statement tells you that a merchant is handling your data in a certain way and they don't do it, that's deceitful, and the FTC will come down on them like a ton of bricks. But lately, they've been focused on the unfair trade practice issue, And the federal courts have upheld their power to treat terrible cyber security as an unfair trade practice. That is having a ripple effect. Now, what I'm watching is whether in this case they're going to focus on the behavior of patching, not patching, and so forth, and really ramp up the standard of care in this issue. That would be a big deal.
Indeed, those are some changes we need. Thank you, Joel. Joel Brenner, Senior Advisor to the Church Talk Group.
Still to come on the show.